This is the Influencer Entrepreneurs Podcast with Jenny Melrose, where I strategize with business owners on how to grow and scale their businesses to hit their income goals. This is episode 236 of the Influencer Entrepreneurs Podcast with Jenny Melrose. Today I'm speaking with Melissa Rodgers, and we are going to be diving into realistic tips for time management for mom entrepreneurs. Melissa's story is one that I immediately connected to. She not only understands what it's like to be a mom and run her business, but she was thrown into the midst of it all. So I want you to make sure that when you're listening, she's going to give you actionable steps, things that you can do as you're listening. So make sure that you grab a piece of paper and pen and have it ready. If you are driving, don't worry, but you can always come back to this because believe me, you are going to want to. But this is one of those episodes where I know you are going to have huge takeaways from it. Now, before we jump in, I want to make sure that if you haven't already grabbed my revenue planning guide, that you grab it because you're going to see that this corresponds so well with how to revenue plan for your business. You can always send me a DM on Instagram in order to get that, or hop over to the show notes. Instagram would be at Jenny_Melrose. Just send me a DM that simply says revenue planning guide, and I will send it directly to you. All right, you guys, let's dive in. Hi, Melissa. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited to have this conversation. Before we dive into it, though, will you introduce yourself and your business to my audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Melissa Rodgers. I am an online business coach. I work primarily with moms who are building businesses from home or trying to come home from work and build an income that way. My business is focused all around helping moms start and scale service-based businesses and then grow into the digital product space. So what we do is we focus on getting them set up using their skills or education or experience to generate a nice substantial full-time income selling services, and then to create even additional income without adding more hours to their workload, because as we all know, we only have so many and we have less than most people, especially when your kids are younger. So that is the focus of my business. I actually have a project management and program development background. That's where I started my career. When I got pregnant with my first son, I fully intended to go back to work and for him to go to daycare and for me to continue pursuing my career. I'm a 90s baby, so I wanted to be the Elle Woods of my career. And what happened when my son was a few months old is that my siblings, who were all minors at the time, actually ended up coming to live with us unexpectedly. So in the space of a few months, I went from having 0 kids to having 4 kids in my home. And so I had a baby that was a few months old. We had a 10-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 16-year-old. And I approached my employer, asked for some flexibility in my hours, not around the job description, just around sort of the times, because they had come to us mid-year and we have a school shortage issue here. Everyone was in a different school. So it would have been 3 different schools and a daycare and a full-time job. And my employer basically told me to get bent. They said, we can't offer you any flexibility. If you can't do the job the way you did it before, then you can't have it. And so that really sort of lit a fire under me. I had been blogging, the same as you. I had been blogging a little bit before, not successfully. I had never taken it full time, but I had been writing for other people's blogs for quite some time. So I had some idea of how to freelance and, how to make connections that way. I was relatively familiar with the online world and I had a decent amount of web design experience. So when it became apparent that I couldn't go back to my job, I started copywriting and then building websites and eventually developing brands for clients in a service-based done-for-you capacity. I did that for a few years and scaled it pretty rapidly to a full-time income. While I was home with my littlest, at the time my only, he didn't go to daycare or anything like that. So I had him full-time and I was running my business and I started to get so many questions about how I was doing it, because there's a lot of moms trying to do the same thing, but unfortunately not able to sort of get it off the ground or execute the business like a business, right? I think a big issue with, it seems to be with moms especially, is that we're so focused on our kids and on taking care of our families, is that we don't treat our businesses like businesses a lot of the time. And so that was kind of a big issue that I saw happening. And that's how Self-Made Mama was created. It just kind of spawned naturally out of people asking so many questions. I started going live on Facebook to teach things almost in real time as I was learning them. And it just really exploded from there. And today I have, a full-time coaching practice, a busy group program, and this is what I do 100% of the time.
In your story, I have, of course, anytime I go to interview someone, I do a little bit of digging, and I had read your story about how you had gone from 0 to 4 kids, and just amazing. And I'm assuming you said 90s baby, so you're, in my mind, being a 70s baby, you're very young.
I was 26 when that happened.
Yes. So you had to take on a lot. And then to be able to pull yourself out and still continue to grow your business, it's just amazing. And also part of the reason I think you are the perfect person to come in to speak about tips for time management. I just think it is one of the biggest struggles that we as women have, because like you said, we get pulled in so many different directions. And we often, like you said, think of our businesses as hobbies. That's how I started. It was a hobby. And then once you see that their money can come in, normally people start to switch it. So when it comes to tips for time management, what should be our focus?
Well, this is a very loaded question. I think, first of all, I think you need to approach this with a good mindset, because for myself, like, I'm relatively organized, but I am definitely not that mom that has like appointments booked 3 months in advance. Like, I open my calendar every morning and I'm like, oh, I have a podcast interview today. Like, I am not this like time management guru. I am not the post-it planner mom. So I just want to preface this information with that. Like, if I can do this, you can do this, because I am a hot mess 99% of the time, and I've somehow still managed to grow this company efficiently. So I'm definitely not that type A person in terms of organization and planning. But I think when we are looking at time management for our business, the very first thing that we need to focus on is establishing our realistic capacity. So I think that a lot of people, we do one of two things. We either kind of look at our schedules or think about our schedules and we think, oh my God, I just have no time. And then we never do anything, because we have decided in our brains that we have 0 time and that we can't possibly tackle any other thing. And it just feels overwhelming. And so we do nothing. Or we are overly optimistic about what we can accomplish and we take on way too much and we literally do not have the time to do it. And then things pile up, or they don't get done, or we get burnt out trying to do it and we always feel behind. Those are kind of the two scenarios that I would say 90% of moms with businesses fall into at one point or another, because we have the pessimists and the optimists when it comes to time management. And those are the results. But I think that we can avoid that entirely by being super intentional about establishing our actual real capacity. And so the way that I like to do that is with a time audit. So I have a small product that I can talk about later that will walk you through this system entirely, but you can do this for free. You take a piece of paper and you draw a 12 by 14 grid. You can also do it on the computer using a table. And what you do is you go through, and each one of those squares represents an hour in your week. So you go through hour by hour. And the first thing I do is I cross off all the hours that I'm sleeping or trying to sleep, because I have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old. But I cross off all the hours that I'm in bed. And then I cross off the hours that I am actively with my kids, where there's no work happening. My personal preference is to not try to work at the same time as solo parenting my children. I used to try and do that all the time. And if I have one regret about building my business, it's that I was very distracted when my first was little, because I was trying to do both simultaneously. And if I had had better boundaries, that wouldn't have been necessary. And I understand that now. And so that's my first sort of piece of advice to everybody. And that's why we do this exercise, right? So you go through square by square. And if you can't think about this sort of like just off the cuff, then what you can do is actually just keep this piece of paper like on your fridge or something, and you can go through and write out what you do every hour. So set an alarm on your phone for every like 2 or 3 hours, and then come back and fill in the piece of paper with what you did in that time. And what you will find is that you actually have pockets of time that you didn't know existed that you're currently using for things that don't support your goals. And so what often comes up is that a lot of people find that they're spending like 6 hours a day on Instagram, or they're spending 3 hours a night on Netflix. And it's not that those things are bad. Like, I don't ever want anybody to attach shame or guilt to these activities, because like being a mom is really hard. Being a mom in a pandemic is even harder. And then being a mom in a pandemic running a business, like check me into the psych ward some days. Honestly, like I'm not okay. And honestly, we have to give ourselves a bit of grace in that capacity, but we still have to have the discipline to understand that if we are spending our time all the time on those kind of like mental buffering activities where our brains don't have to do anything, then we're not going to achieve our goals. So by doing this exercise and doing a time audit and understanding your actual capacity, you may find that you have 15, 20, 25 hours a week that you could be spending on your business. And the reality is that you can run a 6-figure business on 20 hours a week very easily. It is super doable. Most people that work an 8-hour workday are only actually productive for 2.25 hours. So if you can carve out 2.25 hours, 5 days a week, you can run a full-time business in that time. It is super doable. And I don't think that people realize that. And that's sort of my favorite thing to tell people is like, yes, you can. You can totally do this.
Yes. And I think I don't know if you saw me do it, but I did a silent little clap when you said it. You used the word boundary because I think that is like one of the most important things, whether it's boundaries with our kids, as far as them breaking it, clients breaking into that time, or task breaking into that time with our kids, but also with our significant others. I think that was a huge piece of the beginning of my business, when I felt like I was in the hustle. Oh, it messed with our relationship a ton, because it was, why are you always working? Why are you always on your phone? And I think it opened up those levels of communication with us, because we're not communicators by nature at all. And once we did have that conversation, I realized it was an issue. I was able to put those boundaries in place. And no, I can't sit on my phone and look at Instagram while we're supposed to be like hanging out watching a movie. Even though I totally could. That was an issue for him. He felt like I wasn't present and I was doing something else. I was distracted, whatever else. So I love that you used the word boundaries. I just think, as a mom, that needs to be defined, and totally agree about the amount of hours that you can do it in a week. Because I have very crazy hours that work for me and work for my family, and it works for the business.
Yeah, absolutely. I currently work 2 days a week. I work 2 full days, so 2 7-hour days. And let's be honest, I usually go to Starbucks at some point in that time, and, so it's probably not even 7 hours. And I do 1 half day somewhere in the rest of the week, depending on what works for our schedule that week. And if I have a call that falls outside of that boundary in the evening or something, that's maybe once or twice a week. So I would say less than 3 days a week right now is what I work. And I have a 6-figure business. It is so doable, and I'm a normal person. I now have a nanny and I have daycare and things like that, but I did not have those getting to this point. That's something that I invested in after, which if you have the ability to do it the other way around, I highly recommend investing first and getting the time freedom that you need to work. But that wasn't a reality for us back then. And so I had to do it the other way. I had to hustle through. So it's 100% doable.
Yes. And I think even when I was working full time as a teacher and had the 2 babies at the time, it was the same thing. Yes, they couldn't be normal work hours like they are now. I work 10 to 2, Monday through Friday. That's it. But I found those pockets like you talked about in your time audit. So I love the fact that it makes it super easy to see where you can get some of the pockets of time back. So one of the other things I think as mom entrepreneurs that we run into is that we often get advice coming from men to focus on just one thing. So is this possible?
No. I think the personal development space, less so the entrepreneur space now, But way back, as you said, when dinosaurs roamed the earth and we all had just blogs, it was dominated by like kind of, I don't know, like middle-aged white men telling us how to live our lives. And to be honest, I find that it's so out of touch and it doesn't apply to most moms. I think that we have to be really cognizant of where we're getting our advice from and what ways that person's situation differs from ours in terms of privilege. Because I think it's very easy for a 7 or 8 figure entrepreneur to tell you how you should run your day, particularly if they don't have children. But even if they do, like living a wealthy life with children is a drastically different experience than living a middle class or low income life with children. Because the expectation in our society, at least in North America, is that if you are middle class or low income, that you are going to be the workhorse that propels your family forward and that you are going to be the one doing all the heavy lifting and making it work. Whereas when someone is in, a higher tax bracket, so to speak, the culture and expectation is that they will outsource the things that they need to outsource in order to get what they need to get done. And then they can sit there with all of their accomplishments and sort of say to you, well, this is how I've done it and this is how you should do it. And you just need to push through. And there's a disconnect there. Because somebody that is getting up at, 4 or 5 in the morning and getting their kids ready, dropping them off at daycare, taking the bus to work, going to work for, like a lower wage job, and then coming home, picking up their kids, making dinner, getting them to bed, like that is an entirely different situation than, even for example, what you just described, like working 10 to 2. I'm assuming your kids are school age at this point, that is a drastically different capacity situation. And so I think it's not that all the advice coming from these people is wrong. It's that you have to filter it and understand what you can apply realistically and not take on feelings of inadequacy if their advice doesn't work for you. And I promise you, there are people out there who have been where you are and who have advice that will work for you. Like, as I said, like when I started my business, like things were not good for us. It was a very stressful time in every way. And I recognized that we still had a significant amount of privilege at that time that many of my audience members may not have. And so I really try, when I give advice, I really try to give specific examples of different situations based on my students. I have students that come from all different backgrounds, all different situations. We have in my group program, we have a woman who recently unexpectedly separated from her husband, like just sort of came out of nowhere. And so sort of overnight, she became a single mom to 2 little ones. And we had to pivot her strategy to allow for that. We got on a one-on-one call and we talked about, okay, what do we do now? What do we need to change now? And I think like you have to keep it real. Like you have to really acknowledge where you're at and what your realistic situation looks like, and not think that you can't do it just because somebody's blanket advice that doesn't align with your life doesn't work. Right. So I don't think it's possible for us to focus on just one thing. I kind of went on a detour there. Sorry.
It was perfect because I want people to understand that you use the word privilege. I think that that's the perfect way to describe it. It absolutely is different for every single person. I think one of the biggest issues I see moms and women making in general is they look at Instagram and they think, oh, she's got it all together. She does it. Like, why can't I keep it together like that? She's running her business. She's got babies. She looks amazing. Yet we got to remember we're comparing our point in our journey to someone else's that could be where we were 5 years ago. They're 5 years ahead of us as far as that journey. I think even listening to some of the gurus that are women, they'll talk about, oh, I did this and I made my business grow in 6 months to 7 figures. Yet, what did they do before? Did they work for Tony Robbins prior to doing what they do now? Like, let's have that conversation and not just blow smoke. Because I think that's all we see. And it becomes an issue because we try to compare ourselves to that. So I'm glad that you kind of brought that forward for sure. So, okay, what are your top tips for time management? If we do the audit,
Mm-hmm.
and then what can we move forward with from there?
Mm-hmm. So the way that I systematize time management is that I like to separate everything into sort of like departments in my business. So, and this is what I recommend for all my clients as well. And it's something that you can implement really easily, just again, on a piece of paper. I'm a big fan of pen and paper. I really feel like writing things out pulls it out of your brain, and the process of writing it forces you to process what you're writing. And that is really valuable when you're doing these exercises. So grab a piece of paper, write down marketing, sales, delivery, and admin, 4 columns. And what you're going to do is you're going to look at all of the things that you have to do in a week for your business. And you're going to categorize them into those 4 columns. And what I like to do is I like to block chunks of time for those things. So I actually color code my calendar based on those things. So for me, your number one priority needs to be your marketing. So a lot of people will make their delivery, what they're delivering to their clients, their number one priority. And I don't want to suggest that that's not important, because it absolutely is. You need to do good work. So like, for example, if you're a blogger and you have a partnership with a brand, like I'm not suggesting that you just slough off the deadline for them in any way. But if you are a blogger that makes your money through sponsored partnerships, then your number one priority every day needs to be sending a pitch, or every week needs to be doing your batch pitching or whatever it is, because you cannot sustain your business if your business doesn't sustain you. So your marketing needs to be your number one priority. And then your delivery and your sales, I kind of consider those equal priority, right? So you need to make sure you're serving your existing clients. And then your sales would be like when you're getting on the phone with someone or exchanging emails with someone to, solidify a brand deal or to close a contract for your services, whatever it is. That would be your sales. Your delivery is what you're providing to your clients. And then your admin is kind of everything else. And I want you to separate out your admin because, first of all, it's the easiest thing to outsource if you have any extra capacity at all. It's very inexpensive to outsource administrative tasks, and they need to be batched, in my opinion, because otherwise what happens is you get into your email to try and answer a few emails, or you go to do your bookkeeping, and then the next thing you know, like 6 hours have gone past. You haven't done any marketing, you haven't followed up on your sales that you have in the pipeline, and you haven't done any client work. You've just been like screwing around in your accounting software for 6 hours. And, this happens really easily, right? And again, if you only have 15 hours a week to work on your business, you need to have that time divvied up appropriately so that you can work on it. The next tip is also to schedule in lots of white space, particularly if your kids are young. So I do not book my calendar up. So like, as I said, I have my 2 full working days where my nanny's here all day. And then I do a half day. My husband will, take the boys to go do something, and I'll do a half day while he's doing that. And I do not book those solid. So I actually try to have all of my calls on the one day. I keep a day for me to do like delivery of client work or to work with coaching clients. And I keep my half day for me, for self-made mama, to do kind of like CEO work, right? And having a little bit of time carved out for that CEO style planning is really important too. Less so at first, because at first you're just kind of you're trying to get into a rhythm, right? You're trying to get your sales consistent, make sure that you're marketing consistently so that your sales can be consistent, and make sure that you're delivering good work to your clients. But as your business grows, you're going to need to take time out of your week every week to do CEO thinking, to sit down and map out where your business is going and how you're going to get it there.
Yes. That was exactly what I was hoping you were going to say, because I'm a big believer in batching and trying to get things kind of into their pockets of time so that you can kind of see where it's going to best work for your schedule and for the things that you talked about as far as those categories. You said the admin piece and the bookkeeping, and I'm like, yep, been there, done that, wasted tons of time that didn't need to be wasted. And you're right. Those are the things that can absolutely get handed off as your business starts to grow and you have more income coming in revenue wise. So right now you're offering my audience a guide for the 8 essential habits of high performing women. What I love is that you call them habits. Can you talk more about the significance of this?
Yeah, so this is my favorite topic. We could do a whole podcast about this. I will try not to talk for too long. I am a huge personal development fan, and I have consumed so much personal development content over the years. And the general theme that has I've pulled out of this, and the theme that I've seen in my life and my coaching clients' lives, is that our results are not so much determined by what we do in like the business sense. Like, it's not whether or not you post to Instagram 5 days a week, or, whether you send 10 pitches a week or whatever it is, right? Your results are less determined by that and more determined by who you are in like the minutia of your day, and how you spend your days and how they flow together, right? Because you cannot create amazing results and perform at an optimal level if you are not conditioning yourself and treating yourself at an optimal level. So when I first started my business, I didn't really eat because I didn't have a lot of time. I would like not eat all day, and then I would go through the Starbucks drive-through, get my like fifth coffee of the day and like a lemon loaf, and eat that at 2:00. Or I would go get a junior chicken from the McDonald's drive-through, and then I would eat dinner, and then I would have 2 glasses of wine in the evening, and that would be it. So I was eating like a ridiculously low amount of calories, still not thin because I was just like running on cortisol and, just like not treating myself well. And I ended up working so hard and not eating properly, not exercising, not taking time for myself, really neglecting my self-care, and neglecting like my mental health. And I ended up basically giving myself adrenal fatigue this way because I was, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, we had a whole bunch of kids in the house. Obviously, that was the result of an extremely stressful situation. Like, you don't just spontaneously get teenagers because everything's great. So things were not great. And it was a really hard time in my life, and I wasn't taking care of myself, and I made myself ill because of it. And I had, a string of miscarriages because my health just wasn't great. And it wasn't anything like, I wasn't like acutely ill or anything like that, but I was just mistreating my body and mistreating my mind. And I finally got to the point, the miscarriages were the turning point for me. They really alerted me to the fact that like, okay, how you're feeling like in your brain is actually affecting your body. What you're doing right now is unsustainable, and your body is not in an optimal place. And so I started researching how to address that. What would be the most achievable ways for me to become healthier, for me to optimize my mind, optimize my body for the results that I wanted out of my life. And that's sort of where this guide came from. Is once I started to make those changes, I started to eat better. I started to move more often. I started to practice more, like I call it brain training inside the guide. Like, I started to practice more visualization, really building habits into my day that I felt like would set me up for success, and habits that would be those of a successful person, way beyond where I was at the time. And within a few months of doing that, things started to shift pretty dramatically because I was becoming a different person. I was becoming healthier and happier and more efficient and more productive and more balanced. And, my brain fog lifted for the most part. And I was able to sort of see where I was going, be optimistic and clear about how I was going to get there, and actually take like efficient action towards those things that I wanted. And it changed everything. And so that's why I created the guide, because it has inside, there's 8 habits that I believe are absolutely essential if you want to be a high achieving mom. And it's written, any women can benefit from it, but it is written for moms with the understanding, as we talked about previously, that what some 40-year-old, triathlete man tells me is a great habit for me to have is probably not realistic for me at this time of my life, where I'm like sweeping up Cheerios 14 times a day and like trying to get applesauce out of my shirt. Like, that's not going to be realistic for me. So the guide is written for moms who are, being pulled in 100 different directions, but moms that have big ambitions and big goals and want to optimize themselves and set themselves up to be successful in achieving them.
We are going to link to that guide in the show notes to make sure. And you all that are listening can definitely send me a message on Instagram that you want it. And I will make sure to send you the link directly through DM so that you can just get that guide. I think that this is more needed than any time, because a lot of us are feeling just kind of caught because of COVID. We
Mm-hmm.
still aren't back to an entirely normal. It has become a new normal, as everyone likes to say. But I think that this is just so needed. And I, for one, am planning on going over and grabbing this guide immediately, because I have been at that point where it's kind of like I've been coasting and we need to get that little push. So this is perfect. I appreciate you offering that up, Melissa. Melissa, where are the best places to connect with you?
Probably the best place is Instagram. So I am at selfmademama_, because some horrible person has self-made mama. No, I'm just kidding. But at selfmademama_, just like you, even if I'm not active on my feed, I'm always checking my DMs. That's sort of my primary mode of communication with my audience. You can also find me at theselfmademama.com. And I have a podcast called Self-Made Mamas. You can search that wherever you listen to podcasts.
Perfect. You're going to link to all of that in the show notes. Melissa, I appreciate you so much for taking the time to speak with my audience.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. All right. I'm hoping that some of you started doing the exercises that she offered right away. And if you have not, make sure that you go back, listen to this again when you have a time where you can actually focus in and do the exercises that she talked you through. And also, make sure you grab her 8 essential habits. I told her directly afterwards, I was not just blowing smoke saying that I was going to download it. I have gotten it, and planning on making sure that I am just revisiting these and putting those 8 essential habits back into practice. As always, I appreciate you guys so much for taking the time to listen in. If you haven't already left a review on your favorite podcasting app, I would so appreciate it if you took the time to do so. It helps me to continue to get great guests just like Melissa. All right, you guys, until next time, I will see you all then.